Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar on this Thursday morning. We'll give everyone just a couple minutes to get in there. So if you need to, go ahead and grab a cup of coffee or grab a drink and get started here in just a couple minutes. And for all those just joining now too, we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
Can't believe it's already September 5th.
Yeah, it is.
Wild.
You're almost in the fall.
My wife told me this morning it was National Cheese Pizza Day.
Hmm, could be
Whatever
good.
that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds like a great day.
Yeah, I think there's a day for everything these days. So I
Yeah,
think it's like the industries do it to like donut day. It's like
yeah,
Dunkin' Donuts and Krispy Kreme.
yeah.
Like, yeah, it'd be a good thing to do. Let's get some press out there. So
I think that's something social media managers have all created across the
yeah,
world, probably
yeah.
something to post about every day.
Yeah, we'll just get started here in just one more minute. Thank you guys for your patience. Just let everyone fill in and we'll get started talking about our license plate recognition solutions, use cases, and some tips about setup and planning these kind of cameras out. Yeah, we need a license plate recognition day.
Yeah, license LPR recognition. That's funny.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and maybe get started now and people can catch up as they get in here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar on license plate recognition, some of the solutions that we offer. We're going to talk about use case and also some tips on the setup, and we'll go over the process. So today's agenda more specifically, what is a license plate camera? This is something that over the 11 plus years I've been in this industry, this is one of those terms that has been used pretty loosely, I would say. I feel like we've got a lot of customer confusion when it comes to what even defines what a license plate camera is, what it does. So we'll kind of clarify that and some of the things that you should know if you're shopping around out there. We'll talk about our solution that we offer. It's just was released in July, so pretty new offering from us. We'll go over that solution in a live demo. We'll show you kind of what that looks like, what it can do. We'll talk about some use case examples, like where can license plate recognition be used to help improve your facility, your way your facility operates. And then we'll talk about tips and tricks on the install, and then we'll also hit up some Q&A near the end if we've got time. So about SEW a little bit, we're a value-driven company. It provides end-to-end solutions. So whether you're looking for a DIY setup, you're looking for an installation setup, we can provide both of those. Free consultation. So if you are interested specifically license plate, this can be a little bit of a complicated topic. It's really great to have somebody with some expertise there in your corner to help you plan it out, where the camera should be placed, things to know, distances, all that kind of stuff that factors in with license plates. It's really good to get a free consult, talk to us and see if we're a great fit for you. And then we also have dealer programs. So I know we have some of our installation clients in there. So if you also are an installer and you're not in our dealer program, check us out. And then our key hallmark is that we provide world-class support, all based here in the US and North Carolina. So definitely if you ever have any issues with anything, our team's there to make sure it's right. So the first topic we're going to talk about is all the terms and what a license plate camera actually is. There's LPR, there's OCR, ALPR, oh my, right? What does that all mean? Well, a lot of times people come with us with sort of a term overload, and they don't actually know what is a license plate camera? And that's because that term is sort of used a little bit more loosely than it probably should be. Um, in some cases, people come to us with like, oh, we're looking for, look at this camera. This is a license plate camera. And in reality, they're expecting that license plate camera to be able to read the digits and automatically take pictures of the plates. And it turns out that that's actually not what that thing does. All it means is that that camera has the general specs, the zoom, etc., to be able to capture license plates if it's set up that way. Um, some of them go a step further. Well, they'll have automatic plate snapshots. So they'll be able to see, okay, yeah, this is a license plate and I'm taking a snapshot, and then you should hopefully be able to easily find that. Um, and then others can also take that a step further. They can log and do text search. So not only can you see the plate snapshots, but it will actually grab those digits off that plate, and then you can search for them to be able to easily find, hey, when did the delivery truck come in, or when did our van leave, and stuff like that. Um, so there's a lot of different variations in it, and sometimes that leads to confusion and disappointment. So let's go over some of those, what those terms actually generally mean. And I say generally because I've seen variations on this too. Again, there's some variation. We'll talk about that in just a second too. But LPC, license plate capture, this might just mean, and some people use this in terms of grabbing that plate, but sometimes it, and very frequently, is just used in a way that says, hey, this camera has the specs to be able to see license plates and playback. So that means that in order for you to go see the plates, you have to go to playback, find when a car came by, pause it at the right time, everything like that, right? Um, whereas license plate recognition is more of when you're starting to get LPR, I should say, license plate recognition. That's when you should expect to know that the camera has the brains, the system has the brains to be able to know, yeah, this is the license plate. We're going to automatically take that image and turn it into a snapshot that you can easily find. And then the other term that you'll hear sometimes is ALPR, and that's automated license plate recognition. So that usually involves, here's another term, so we go with the overload a little bit, OCR, which stands for optical character recognition, which is that ability to be able to turn those snapshots of, say, the plate number into text that's then searchable and exportable and all that. Now, all this being said, I recommend, especially if you're shopping around and you're looking for a solution, that don't rely necessarily entirely on the terms to inform what you're looking for. If you have a specific need and you want to be able, you need that ability to search for those plates, right? Make sure you're asking, hey, does this solution allow me to search that plates, or is it, just a camera that has a spec? You want to make sure that you're getting your needs, and don't rely on those terms to necessarily inform what you're going to get, because sometimes it's not always the case. Um, So speaking of our solution, let's go a little bit more specifically into this. I do know we have some questions that I'll get to just before we get to the demo, because we'll show some of that. But um, our solution is kind of a two-part solution. It's a camera and our NVR in software. So the camera's name is the Specialist 2.0, since it's kind of a specialty camera. And give you some high level look at the specs here. The Specialist 2.0 is a 10x optical zoom. So that means it's got quite a bit of range for, different distances of plates, whether that's kind of short distances or up to 150 feet on the range. So you got quite a lot of range here, which is great to have because, as we go into the specs and everything, you really want to make sure that plate's as big as possible inside that image. It's also a 1080p camera at 60 frames per second, so it just gives us a lot more shots at getting that picture, and that plate right. Another unique thing about this camera is it doesn't have infrared night vision. Infrared has some occasional difficulties with dealing with plates or reflectiveness, all that kind of stuff. So this actually has a white light that makes it more effective at getting those plates, especially at night. And it's also IP67, so highly weatherproof, even submergible for up to 30 minutes. IK10, which means that it can take an impact resistant rating. That's a standard, not just security camera industry, but all across the industry, rating for impact resistance. And then it's also a very low temperature camera. It can stand temperatures up to -40. So, everyone across our country should be able to use this in every situation. And then the key with this is there's no fees with our solution. So there's no additional monthly or yearly recurring fees to be able to use a license plate um, camera or any of the things that we'll talk about later on in terms of searching and plate data and stuff like that. Now, the solution, that's one part of the solution. The specialist is one part of it. The solution is kind of combined with one of our NVRs. So when you combine this camera that has the specialist has sort of the brains for some of the license plate stuff into it, the chipsets, everything like that. And then you combine it with one of our supported NVRs, which is basically all of our current NVRs except the 4 channel. That's kind of a smaller, so you need to jump up to the 8 if you have a smaller system to get this. Um, and what it will do once you combine it with one of our NVRs is it's going to automatically detect the plates. So, that's that. Okay, yes, I see a plate, and it's going to log that plate for you too. And then it does OCR for both the plates, and that allows you to do plate searches and plate lists. So we'll talk about that in the demo as well. But essentially, what we talked about in all those terms and everything like that is this is kind of checking all those boxes. So it can detect the plate, it can log the plate, and then you can search and do actionable stuff based on those OCRs as well. All right, and no better way of talking about it than actually showing it. So we'll jump into a demo here, but before we do, I do notice we have a couple questions I want to get to now. Um, and the first question is, do you have any NVRs that support this natively and don't need ViewStation? So you can actually do a lot of these functions as well on the web. So on the web interface of the NVR, you can do plate searches. You can do exporting as well, and you can create the list and everything like that from the web interface of the NVR too. So you don't need to use ViewStation. I find ViewStation to be more efficient on this, and I'll kind of go into a little bit why once we get the demo going, but you technically don't need ViewStation to use this. You can actually do it on the web interface. Um, and how do these cameras handle, another question was, how do the cameras handle headlights at night? Are the external IR sources needed for some environments? Um, really good question. We'll actually cover that more in depth at the end here when we talk about sort of the setup. But in general, like because we have the white light and we have the um the ability to have the zoom and everything like that. A lot of the headlight thing comes into in terms of placement and stuff. You got to make sure that the headlights aren't kind of blinding into the camera and stuff like that. We'll talk more about it as we go on, but yeah, there's definitely options there. And I wouldn't say you need external IR lights. You probably more so want more white lighting in the area or just general lighting in the area if possible with this camera because it is a white light camera. And then the last question before we go into the demo, does your solution offer alerting when a specific plate is detected? Yeah, you can do that based on the list, and we can do email alerts right now, and we'll show that in just a second as well. So, all right, so the demo, what we're going to demo is kind of 3 areas. So we're going to demo the plate logging capability, and then the plate searching and exporting capability, along with the plate list. And this is going to be through the ViewStation software. So let me go ahead and jump out of this now. And this is our SW ViewStation software. For those who aren't familiar with it, this is our free VMS, and this allows you to view multiple systems together from multiple locations, and also now has this new LPR module, which is right here in the beginning. So if we go in and we click this, we'll see kind of what this looks like and the capability real quick. We have real-time monitoring. So this just basically allows you to set up a live camera. So if you have like a guard or something like that that sort of needs to keep track of the plates that come in, this will populate in here live. And then I'll talk about the list and everything after. The first thing I actually want to go over is just like the pass-through records section. This is where we're going to see the historical plate data. So if I go to our warehouse here and I'll go and I'll select, let's go from yesterday to today, and I hit search here. This is going to bring up the list of all the plates that were detected today and yesterday. So basically the last 24 hours or so. And you can see from here that so if I just select like this one over here, you'll see that on the right here we've got a screenshot, and I can make that bigger. And also a tab up here for the video. So I can click this, play the video. And if I need the video of this, I can also go ahead and click download here and download this to my computer. This is one thing that ViewStation, to answer the earlier question, that ViewStation does a little bit better than the web, in my opinion, is it allows you to download that clip right there. You can download snapshots and everything, and I do know that believe they're working on grabbing the download ability on the web too, but right now this is only on ViewStation, so that's why I kind of prefer it. And so yeah, we can go through and check all the ones from today as well. And again, same kind of thing here. So if I just were to select this one here, I can check out the image and then play the video here as well if I want to. And so that's a good way of checking to see what's going on with any of the plate data that's going in. And you can see over here we have specific time periods, so I can select like the last 3 days, last 7 days. But I can also search by specific time periods too, if you want to, by selecting your calendar. And yeah, that's kind of the quick look at the plate search, really easy to find those things. The other aspect of this too is that you can export this as well. So if you click export, this is going to give you the ability to export this to like a CSV file. So if I go ahead and do today, as well as export all of the snapshots for you too. So that way, if you just need to kind of quickly see what that looks like, here is the folder here. I can see the CSV file, which has all of the data into it as well. So you guys can see all of the numbers as well as all of the snapshots here too. And you can kind of just go through them and see what that looks like from an exporting perspective. You just need, whether it's a day or if you need longer time periods of being able to export that data and be able to see that data as well. So that's kind of the plate searching or the plate logging capability, I should say. We also have plate logging capability too. So if I were to go and select, let's go to the month of August. So we'll go from the 1st to the 31st here. And if I want to see one of our vans here, which I believe starts with HLX, I'm going to go ahead and type in HLX here, and I'm going to hit search. And you'll see I can see when these vans have left. I think we have another one that's HLV, so it's going to bring up that one. And I can see, each time that this van has, oh, actually, this is a SUV, one of our other frequent visitors. So I can see every single time that this SUV has left the facility. So in North Carolina, we only have the back plates, so this is basically an exit camera. But I can now see go through every time in the last month, every record. I can export this specific part as well. So if you only want to export a certain plate data, so maybe an employee, kind of track when they're coming in, or deliveries when they're coming in, and everything like that as well. So that's kind of the plate search and the plate logging capability within ViewStation. The other part that we wanted to talk about too is the plate list capability. So if I go here to the vehicle library management, and you'll see that on this NVR, we've got a couple different lists here. So you can both import and export lists. So if you have like a CSV file, you actually can import all of the plate data in here as well. There's a template here you can download. And then what I'll do too is show this from the web so we can see kind of the actions that we can do. So let me access this one. And oops, here. And under the plate comparison section here under the web, this is actually where some of the actions we can take. So if I add a task here, you'll see that I can name this maybe, you know, employees entering. And I can choose my list here. So you see I've got a list of employees, delivery, vendors, and problem plates. So that could be people who maybe smash into something before or something like that. And I can choose my schedule here. So if I only want to be alerted or have these actions happen during a specific time period, I can do that as well. It gets very granular. And then over here on the match trigger action. So this means that it's matching a plate that's on this employee's list. So this means that basically an employee is now entering the facility. I have the following options here. So we can have the NVR has, a little beeper speaker, buzzer speaker that can go off so that can let somebody know that, hey, an employee's arriving or, whatever you want to do there. We also have this let through option. So what that is on the physical hardware side of this camera, we have alarm relay output. So this allows it to actually connect to a gate that has third-party gate that has physical relays on it. So that way you can actually tell, okay, once an employee is detected, let's go ahead and open up that gate. And we'll go over that kind of more specifically when we talk about the use cases and where that can be. The other stuff here is things like alarm output. So, the NVR also has alarm outputs that you can then trigger. I know some people will, a gate's a very common one for something like this. Other things like, a light on in a warehouse or something like that to let them know that a truck's coming to that lane. I've heard things like that. So alarm outputs are almost limitless in terms of what you want to do with them, but you can trigger an alarm output when it comes to this camera. Of course, you can also record based on that and record, both its channel and other cameras. And another cool feature too is that you can actually set a PTZ preset. So once it detects a plate, okay, an employee is just detected. I want that PTZ to go zoom in on the gate so I can make sure he's getting in okay. And that there's no problems or anything like that. So you can go ahead and tell a PTZ to go and jump to that area that you want to. Again, very, very granular. And then the other thing you can do, okay, this is an employee who comes here. I want to receive an alert when this comes in. You can trigger the email alert to go to you when there is that match, or oppositely, if for example, if somebody is not on this list, you can have different actions. So, okay, it's not an employee. Um, I really want to have that email sent to me. So you can do that as well. That's kind of part of the list capability too. And as I mentioned, you can have up to 5 different lists on this, and you can see kind of what that looks like. Sorry, searching list here. You can see we've got like one for employees here, delivery trucks, vendors, problem plates, kind of whatever you want to put those under. You can do that and then have 5 different actions based on whether that matches or doesn't match, based on each list. So, um, and that's kind of the overall look at like what you can do with this thing. I mentioned as well that you can do do this from the web. So if you go on the web and you're under the motor vehicle search here, you just simply select your camera and then you hit search here. And this will be kind of the same thing here. So you'll see the video and then the snapshots here, very similar, but again, you can't do it. The download function doesn't exist right now on the web. I believe that's coming, but right now it's only on ViewStation. So um and yeah, that's kind of the main look at the demo and the capability. I should mention we do have other videos and stuff like that you guys can take a look at. If you have any questions, of course, certainly let us know. And I do notice we have um some questions here as well. So let's go ahead and deal with these now. Start with and for capturing license, good question. For capturing license plate, do we need any special permissions? I think you're talking about government authorities. For the most part, I'm not aware of any that you need now. This is the one thing that's to be clear with our solution here. This is sort of like this isn't connecting to a global database or authorities or anything like that. So this is databases that you're sort of maintaining yourself. So you shouldn't need any special permissions or anything like that. Now, if you're trying to connect it to some database or something like that, you may need some permissions or something like that. Um, the another question we have is about Alberta, Canada, and I haven't heard any issues with that. I can definitely put a note for us to follow up. I'll ask around to see if I've seen anything specifically about that. Um, but I haven't heard anything specifically with issues with Alberta. And then Mark asked, will you talk about mounting limitations in regards to heights and angles for the best performance? I understand the 150-foot range. And yes, we actually will, the next section we'll go over in a little bit here. We'll talk about sort of that physical placement and the planning side of things that you really need to do for a license plate camera. These are definitely much more of a, they're not general use cameras. They obviously have a very specific function in mind that's getting that plate. So they have to be put in a way that's specifically, is going to work with it. And there's also another question about, is there an API? There is an API, so if you're interested, we can send that the data over to you after this. So we'll just put a note there to make sure we get about that. And another question about what about notifying a stolen plate number? So that kind of goes into like, this is not something that connects to a central database or anything like that. So you would need to sort of create a list with that and import it in manually for that. Which is possible. I know some people will do that specifically, like, and we'll watch and cover some of these use cases, but like a convenience store chain knows when they had issues with somebody who shoplifted or something like that, and they'll actually sort of pull that together. So, but um, it would be something you'd have to do a little bit manually. And I noticed on the another question, just reading it now, I noticed the YouTube video, this camera says that register or recognized plates can be searched by selecting the blue plate color. I don't understand the connection. Is there a blue? So on that video, I think we're talking about because by default out of the box on this camera, there are some settings you can go into, and our support team can definitely help you get that all set up. By default, it actually will capture every vehicle that goes in. So even if that, for example, in North Carolina, we don't have front plates. So by default, it was capturing every time a vehicle came in. Now, some people want that and some people don't, but you can basically filter only checking for plates by selecting the blue plate color because it detects all plates as blue. It doesn't have like the color recognition on the plate or anything like that. So that's just a way to basically filter, hey, I only want to be able to see plates. I don't want to necessarily see just vehicles coming in. And can we get a feed of the license plates in an API? We can send that API over to you, and we can definitely take a look there. You should be able to get both the data live as well as through a pull function, I believe, as well. I'm not a developer, so but I can definitely send that over to you and get that to you. But thanks you guys for all the great questions. All right, so let's talk about some use cases of this. So where can license plates, sometimes, license plate requests vary all across, whether it's something to track people coming and going, and they just simply want an easy way to be able to find the plates. I'm not sure if anybody's ever dealt with trying to find a plate through, standard playback and you have to go on the timeline and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes just getting the plates is what people need. Other times they have more specific use cases for it. So let's go through a couple that we've experienced over the time and just kind of go over what possibilities exist with this camera and license plates in general, really. So this one's a manufacturing plant that has an entry gate. So their employees come in through here, and it has an access control set up there too. So they, typically are supposed to put their badge up there. But it sometimes causes delays, especially in the morning. Somebody that is fumbling around with their badge or it's not reading quite right and all that kind of stuff. And management wanted a little less friction with that gate. They wanted things to be a little bit more open without necessarily sacrificing, security with it, along with like tracking capabilities, being able to see, okay, what time are people coming in? When are we getting deliveries? All that kind of stuff. And so what's the solution here and the benefits of it? So they install a specialist at the gate. they created an employee plate list, sort of like we saw a little bit earlier, and they connected it to their gate using that alarm relay and everything. And that allowed them to do automatic plate entry by the number. So once they know an employee time is there, the gate can send the camera sends that alarm output to the relay, and then it gets to the gate, which opens up when it gets that relay. Um, and then the other part too, in terms of what this solution gets to this manufacturing plant, is it also gives them it still gives them that same level of understanding of when people are there with it's still logging all the plates. So they can tell the arrival and exit times on, because you know they got two gates there. They can see both when people are coming, when they're leaving, etc. And then the other benefit too is that the gate stays closed for non-employees. So, you know, if they have a visitor there, they can still use like the intercom and everything like that and choose to let them in or not. So it's not like they're just kind of opening it up. It's only going to open up for plates that are registered on that employee list that they created. Another example, a warehouse. So this is one that we had pretty recently where they want to be able to keep track of deliveries, what time trucks are leaving, when they're arriving, both for like the in-house delivery, so when they're sending out something to be delivered, and also their replenishment. So the trucks are coming in to replenish inventory. Um, Well, a specialist was installed at the entrance here as well, as we'll probably see here multiple times. And then a list was created of the delivery trucks. So this allows them to easily search for those for general plates when people are coming and going, gather the timestamp to be able to say, okay, yep, they were here at 3:15 on Tuesday. And so they can find that plate number, search for it, see every single time, like I showed you with our van and the SUV there, every single time that that plate actually arrived into their facility and be able to kind of keep track of that to make sure deliveries are coming out on time and that the replenishments are coming, they know when the replenishments have come in as well. And this is saving them significant time over playback. So they used to have to go through playback and search for vehicles and find out which vehicle is leaving when and all that kind of stuff. Now they can just simply search for that plate number and get that information within seconds. Another one we just recently had too is really an interesting one was self-storage. So self-storage facilities, they have to deal with people who are renting probably the biggest vehicle maybe they ever driven and rental trucks and stuff like that. And so they were having struggles with people who were driving them into part of the building and damaging part of the building, damaging part of the gates, fencing, all that kind of stuff. And again, it's especially by these rented moving vehicles. And it's very difficult for them to identify necessarily who that rental truck was by. You know, they don't necessarily know, you know, unless they have the plate, who it was to actually get insurance and everything like that. So again, a specialist installed at their gate, and this will log every plate that goes in, and then they combine that with other general use cameras that they have just to watch the facility, etc. So when they go and they see damage to part of the building or you know, they get a report or anything they see like damage on the building, the gate, etc. They can easily go back to when they look at those cameras, see when the damage actually occurred, and then go to the license plate camera, search that time period, be able to see that van or the most likely rented van go in, and be able to submit that plate number to insurance so that way they can find out where it was rented from and everything like that. And that helped them um save, you know, a lot of hassle, a lot of money, because a lot of times if they don't have that plate, they're sort of on their own in terms of fixing it. So and yeah, those are kind of some of the examples of, you know, some ways we've seen the license plate solutions being involved. Like I mentioned, sometimes it's just simply the ability to be able to see who's coming and going and what times and be able to easily bring up those plates. Sometimes it's more specific, like opening up the gates, etc. Sometimes it just makes it a lot easier to make sure that they're getting something that's you know, plates are an identifiable to, especially when you're talking about rental cars and stuff like that, to who rented it at what time, and that's sometimes the only evidence that you potentially have. So plates are I think there's a statistic out there, but a very high percentage of crimes involve a vehicle. So being able to have that plate, is sometimes the key evidence that you can use. So, and I know we have some couple more questions as well. Um, will the Specialist 2.0 camera tracker or log templates? So really good question. In my experience, it does log them. Sometimes the OCR capability is not it's not perfect when it comes to that. So I know that's something that the algorithm they're looking to improve a little bit more on, like the temporary plates as well as some of the more odd vanity plates, I guess you can say. Um, so yeah, it typically does log them, but sometimes the actual digits are not always as accurate as they are for standard plates. Um, and another question, I think I saw the solution capture vehicle color. So actually it does have um those functions within like the software on ViewStation and everything, like I showed you there. But this particular camera actually doesn't classify any of that, whether it's color, type, etc. It just simply is the plate. Some of the other cameras that we're looking at adding here in the future may have like colors and stuff like that, but this one doesn't. And how many cameras can the NVR support? In terms of license plate camera, I actually think you can have all of them. So if you have like a 16 channel NVR, all 16 of them can be set up for license plates. Um, I will double check that to make sure, like, if we want to kind of put a ticket out for that one, just to make sure that's accurate. But there really shouldn't be any limitation on that. And the next section we'll go into is more of the setup and planning process here too. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Um, so license plate cameras are they're not general use cameras that you can grab one pretty much any of our general use cameras, put them on the side of a building, and generally get very good coverage out of them and clarity, especially with some of our 4K stuff out there. And you don't have to think a ton about like the physical placement. Well, that's a little bit different when it comes to license plate. These are special cameras, as we sort of named it. And it definitely requires planning, especially if, with our install, if you get install services through us, we're going to be responsible for planning that out, making sure we're putting in the right situations, etc. But if you're doing it yourself, if you're an installer who's maybe not done license plate stuff before, you do want to make sure that, you're understanding all the factors and the limitations of the cameras. And that includes things like, whether you should aim for getting front or back plates, whether you're getting exits and entries, the angle, distance, zoom, and more. So let's cover some of that right now. Front versus back plates. So 21 out of 50 states in this country only require back plates. And a lot of states that even require front and back plates, I think like in Massachusetts, I know it's like a $50 fine or something if you don't have a front plate. So some people just don't even walk around with the front plate, basically. So a lot of times, especially if you're in a state that obviously doesn't require front plates, but even if you have like a neighboring state that doesn't require front plates, once they go to your state, they don't necessarily need to put one on either. So in general, we recommend that you plan with trying to get back plates. Because it's, you just don't know where people are coming from and whether or not they're going to have that front plate or not. And if you're planning only for the front, then you're in a situation where you may not get the plate that you need. Um, the other situation that makes back plates actually a little bit easier is that back plates are lit. So for the most part, we have the license plate light for most of your cars, so you don't need to have you know, obviously we have the white light built into it, which helps kind of even things out and stuff like that. But the front plates are actually not lit at all. And then the other side of front plates too is that there are headlights. And we had a question earlier about the how does it handle headlights, and a lot of that's also based on the angle and everything like that. Um, in our experience, the camera does fairly well with headlights, especially when it's placed right, especially with the white light, being able to illuminate that front plate for you and everything. Um, but that's when you have to kind of make sure that you're probably a little bit of distance for that, so the headlights aren't washing it out, so that for example, on our driveway, when you're kind of going up, there's actually sort of a hill. And if we place it, the headlights will sort of almost shine into some of our cameras in that area. We got to make sure that, at least for longer periods of time, that doesn't happen. Because one thing with a license plate is that you only need to capture it for a second or two, right? You don't need to have 30 seconds of video on the license plate. One snapshot is enough to get that digit. So as long as you got a couple seconds of it, you should be good. But again, in general, we do recommend planning out for back plates rather than front plates. And to kind of give you an example, like when we look at this facility here, you can kind of see like what that might look like. So people will drive, and let me actually grab my little annotate here. And we basically got two entrances here. If we're concerned about what's happening over here, we've got kind of two entrances that people can come in here. So we've got the one over here and the one over here. So this is actually a pretty good application here for license plate. So we could, easily install one over here on this part of the building and easily over here and be able to get them while they're leaving, no matter which side they choose to leave. So, obviously we could try to get the front plates, everything like that. But in this case, we definitely know that no matter what, a vehicle comes in from this side and sort of tracks in, and then they leave this way, we know we're going to potentially get them at the front, but most likely, even if they don't have a front plate, we're going to get them as they leave. So this is a really good use case of it. Sometimes, depending on the facility and everything like that, it may not always be as cut and dry here. Like for example, maybe I care about this parking lot to the left. We may need to have one installed over there as well, including maybe even two on this side, depending on the level of coverage you're really looking for. But in this case, the person only cares about the trucks that are coming in over here. So we are easily able to install one here and install one over here and kind of point down in both ways. So that's kind of just part of the planning process. You really have to look and see how can people enter this facility, how can people exit the facility, and how far are those, kind of choke points to the facility as well. And then angle. This is another key factor with plates, one of the most important ones. We recommend staying as straight on as possible. So when you're trying to get that plate, you want it to be head on as much as you possibly can. You want to stay under like 15 degrees, both vertical and horizontally, so like 30 degrees total. And plan that out. So if we go back to there, we kind of, where can we place this camera? Well, if we could place it maybe down here as well, and then but we kind of got like a little more of an off angle. Or like if we put it here, we'd probably get a pretty tight angle here too. So like when we look at this, this is as straight on as it possibly gets. We know that that's going to be a really good one, and we can also tell here that it narrows out. So that's another key factor that we want to make sure that if we've got multiple lanes and stuff like that, that we've kind of covering that too. That's kind of goes in with the angle too, how vehicles move. And here's another example too at one of our facility here. So like, okay, we want to see vehicles when they're going around here and leaving. And we got potentially a couple different places where we can do that, right? So we could do it maybe down here, but this angle's fairly tight. So we might get them, but we might not get them with the same consistency that we want. The other side is on here on the other side. Now, this is a further away angle, so naturally you think, okay, distance is not always the best thing in the world for any camera, of course, but even though this is further away, the angle's much better, so this is a much better actual installation option. So sometimes you need to, that's where that zoom for this camera, our camera comes in, so as a really important thing because it allows you um to help with that angle situation. If this only had 5x zoom or something like that, we might not be able to get this at this choke point here. So, and then this is an example of kind of what that looks like. So this is more of exactly where we installed it there, and this is more on the side of the building. You can see like this is going to capture that plate very consistently, and it's going to capture those digits on the OCR side, the optical character recognition side, consistently as well. Whereas on this one, it's a bad angle. You can kind of see the plate just is blurry looking and stuff because of We're not getting as much detail on it and everything. And so that's not going to, it may capture the just knowing it's a plate, but the OCR potentially not going to work very well. So you're not going to be able to search those digits very reliably as well. And then the other side of it, so mentioning the zoom, 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 zoom. It's not just Mazdas you got to zoom in on, it's all other vehicles too. So um, inside of our software, when you're actually setting up this camera, there are guides to help you make sure you're getting it right. And of course, this is where our support team can come in too. If you have never set one of these up, it can require a little bit of testing and tweaking everything like that. Um, but you can see kind of what this looks like. So if we're looking at this camera over here, this is the same image. We got the van down here, and then we've got the van slightly more zoomed in. So this is zoomed all the way out. This is zoomed a little bit more in, but not zoomed in enough to get the plates, and then more zoomed in here as well. And you can see when you're setting this up, you'll have this guide that looks like a red box. And what you need to make sure with that red box is that essentially it's the size of the plate. So as you're looking at these images, that red box would actually be about the size of this rear end over here on this van. So we need to make sure that the plate size is big enough for it to consistently not just detect the plate, but again, that OCR capability, it really needs those plates to be as big as possible for it to be reliable. The less, there's the good quote that we have on one of our guides that says, license plates are the the satisfaction, the accuracy, the OCR capabilities, all driven by the image it's fed to the system, right? So if you have a bad image that's fed to the system, your results are probably going to be less than maybe what you're expecting. Whereas if you have a good image, the results are going to be much better, of course. So we want to make sure that the zoom level is there and that we're getting the plates to a size that the system's going to be able to work with. A lot of times you can even zoom in more, and that's going to make it even better. A license plate camera is typically just that. It's just a license plate camera. If you're looking for more of like, okay, I need to see the license plate and the entrance, you really usually want to have a specific camera for the plates and then a specific camera for the entrances so that you can see, what kind of vehicle that is, or if something's going on, for example, at the gate, you want to make sure that everything's okay at the gate. Install both a license plate camera and a general use camera for that scenario. And then some other factors. So we did have a question about, is there a speed limit during the day or night? Um, the 15 miles is both for day and night. So, and again, that goes into like the OCR capability. If somebody's going a little faster, still may capture that plate, but the actual digits may not be, what you're looking for when it comes to the logging capability and everything. So, other things to consider is it's about 150 feet when you're fully zoomed in. So that means that you've got the camera at the 10x zoom level. That's going to be able to get you that 150-foot range. If you're zoomed all the way out, it's not going to get you the 150 feet. It's not going to be more like 50 feet or something from the camera, depending on, the distance and stuff. And then it also has the 150 for the white light on it is also rated for 150 feet. So that kind of goes into really this is maximum 150 feet away from the building, which is actually pretty far from most license plate cameras. Most of them are installed fairly close, but the distance does give you that flexibility with the angle. It gives you the flexibility on where you can mount it. So there are a lot of situations where, license plate cameras are installed on poles or, inside some areas where it's like they have to install infrastructure. Whereas if, you have that range, you actually just install it on the building and, lower the cost and the time of installing without having to install any infrastructure. So this can make it easy as well. And some other advice too is you want to make sure that this is working right both day and night. So when you're setting this up, we actually have a full setup guide that we can share after this too that goes into what you should do when you're setting this thing up. But the main thing I recommend is having a vehicle. And whether it's one person doing it, you're kind of doing it. I've set this up using my laptop in my car and I just make sure I drive through and make sure that it's capturing me right. And then I make sure on our install side, we make sure that we also are doing the same thing at night. So that means that we go through and make sure we're driving through and that it's capturing right at night. And if it's not, making sure we're tweaking the white light levels and all that kind of stuff to make sure that it is capturing consistently at night as well. Because day and night, day is a lot easier for the most part for most white light cameras, and night presents a little bit more, I think ours out of the box actually does very well, but depending on your situation and where the distance and everything like that, you still want to test and you still want to make sure that it's capturing at night, especially if you're not a very well travel facility. Our facility is pretty quiet at night, so um we don't have a lot of people leaving the facility after it's dark, especially in the summer. So we want to make sure that that's right. Go there at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or something like that. When it gets dark and there's no twilight kind of effect going on, this is super dark, and that you can make sure that it's getting it right throughout the night. And again, a lot of our resources on this, we do have a full setup guide that we can share to you, that gives you instructions on both this planning, the setup, and the usage on how to actually get the plates, etc. And then you can also contact our experts. So again, if you're doing this for the first time or you have questions, both whether you currently have the system or if you don't have a system, give us a call. We'll be able to tell you what we recommend. We can look at your facility through Google Maps, or if you're looking for install, we can do site visits and everything like that as well. Having this expertise on license plates is a really big thing. Again, this is another stage above general surveillance and making sure that your intrusions aren't happening and stuff. So you definitely helps to have that. And again, there's no obligation with it or anything like that. Same thing if you purchase this camera and you need some assistance on, hey, where should I put this here or here? Our support team, or if you need to figure out what zoom level, etc. That they'll be able to help you there too. So yeah, and that being said, I know we have some more questions here, so I'll go ahead and go into those. Um, this specifically doesn't have the question, excuse me, is are there any options for solar or wireless if we need a camera there isn't a PoE available? Not natively within this camera currently. So it is a standard PoE camera, so it runs off PoE power. So there are solar products out there that can deliver PoE power to this camera, and then also have like a wireless bridge like Ubiquiti, or potentially also, if it's more remote, they can do like a cellular, so like a 4G or 5G modem there. So those options this, it will work with any standard kind of stuff like that, but we don't have one specifically for this at the moment. And then another good question is, I know light bulbs come in different temperatures. What is the best temperature color for night capture? Actually don't specifically know that. I might have to look into that and see. I think ours is a little bit on the, I would say around, if I'm guessing, just based on what I know for my own bulbs and stuff like that, I think it's around like 5500K. So it's like um not like, it's not a super warm white light, but it's not also like a blue light. It's very much in the middle. So I'm not sure as much if the temperature matters when it comes to when it comes to like the plate data and stuff like that. I haven't seen that, but I would say keep it as neutral as possible. You like 5500K is probably where I think ours is at, but I can double check that and get back with you for sure. And we do have just a couple more minutes, so if anybody has any other questions, certainly feel free. And if you want to know more, you want to get more kind of specific stuff, definitely reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. Um, Dylan, anything else to add to this so far, or anything?
That's it. I think you did a good job covering everything and just had some really good questions. I know we've got some kind of one-to-one emails to follow up with afterwards, some of the questions. But again, we're going to send the recording right after this, along with links to pretty much everything we've talked about,
Yeah,
just for right after this. But no, should be
awesome, man.
it.
We have kind of an off-topic question, but how can I extend extended transmission past 750 feet without wireless? Within like the 750 feet is the limit for most of our cameras. In terms of going up beyond that, the actually outs we don't sell them currently anymore, I believe. We used to sell them back in the day, but there are things called PoE extenders, and essentially what they are is like little inline, switches and stuff like that that allow you. So if you have the ability to like weatherproof them and stuff like that, I believe those can go a little bit past 950 feet or something like that. So that may be the next option. I also have heard of, and I haven't personally tested this, but there are some cables out there. Oh man, I forgot the name of them. I might have to follow up with you, but it's um like magic cable or something like that that apparently can go beyond. So we can send you a link to that and you can kind of take a look at it. I haven't personally tested it, so I can't really speak to it specifically, but I've heard other customers mention they've used it and it did work. So that's something that maybe want to look into for that too. And then the follow-up to that is, can I re-up it every 700 feet with injectors extenders? Um, Technically, like the PUE extenders I know of that are like little inline ones, and I'll send you a link after. They can only go to two of them at a time. They can't go further than that, and that's where that 900 something limit ends up. But I'll send those over to you, and if you need to have a conversation with us after, we'll definitely can go into that with you. Magic cable or something like that. But yeah, there's something out there that exists that apparently can go over the traditional 325-foot limit and then also our 750-foot extended transmission limit. So, um, and another factor with that too is just you don't want to do too many of those because then you sort of have a multiple failure points. And also when it gets to like multiple switches kind of daisy chain, there's networking things that go into involve in that too. So but yeah, we can talk about that with our one of our experts after too. So um yeah, thank you guys for all the great questions and the interest. And I don't have anything else I think to add. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.